Nope.
Okay, good.
All right. All right. We are here to finish off the trilogy of episodes on the Lord of the Rings and back for the third and final part of this trilogy of episodes is Hungry Rye. Thanks again for coming
Yay, we
on.
did it.
We
We
did
made
it.
it.
It took well, it didn't take as long as Frodo's journey. He took a year. This only took 6 months. So
Hey,
we did it better than Frodo. We didn't even have the Golem to assist us in finding our way to our conclusion. Um, but before this, I watched the extended edition. We were just talking before we came on, before we kind of talk about the final movie and the whole thing. It's kind of amazing to me how much of this movie this has the most extended minutes of any of the films. It's kind of crazy how much they decided that they weren't going to reveal in the original theatrical release.
right? It's nearly what, like double what the original length was. Like it's already a long movie, but they make it it's like 4 hours and 20 minutes almost, I think, to the dot for the
Yeah,
extended edition. And I think
I
the
think
one that was in theaters was like 2 hours. They usually tap it out about 2 hours.
yeah, it might have gone a little further, but yeah, again, you're right. It's like almost double the movie. There's just, I mean, I could have had a 6 hour movie and I still would have watched it.
Same.
uh, but all the good scenes, like as a quick, maybe as a summation of some of the scenes that, even with all of the amount of additional content that the extended edition gave, there were a couple scenes that were not included from the book to the movie. And I think the only one that I think is worth really discussing at some point in this episode is the scouring of the Shire, which, for very good reasons, as Peter Jackson said, they didn't want it to describe the destruction of the Shire because
It's an
that's
unfortunate ending.
yes. It would be a little depressing to have him spend a year. I think Peter Jackson said, like, how could you have him succeed in this task, come home, and then his like house is just destroyed or his whole.
His poor little hobbit house. Even though he sold it, technically he sold it in the books.
Yes. Well, and the thing too, and not to belabor the point of the Shire being destroyed, but one thing that I think I want to mention later that's interesting is that they rebuild the Shire after, like in the book. They just, following the events of the book, they rebuild the Shire. There's no longer sort of Bilbo Baggins and sort of his being kind of wealthier than the rest of the town. And Sam actually uses the gold, the dust from Gladriel to plant in the center of the town. And I feel like it's like that would have been a. I wish they had woven that in because I think it shows that the hobbits still value like the collective need of the people in their little communist
Yeah, you can
shire.
kind of get back to like where they're getting back into town after visiting Rivendell, and there's like more sheriffs, and there's all these laws and rules and stuff. And that's not what it was before. They kind of just ate when they were hungry and they worked and they got to reap, the fruits of their labor. And now it's all being extracted and being sent off to Sharky. It's like really just Saruman or the other men that are taking it all. So they're starving. They don't even have like their pipe weed.
Heaven forbid. That's like that's like their that's more important, almost more important than food to the hobbits.
It really is.
But I guess since I kind of jumped a little bit to the end of the movie, or I guess not in the movie, but the end of it, I get so in the if to those who haven't listened to the original two episodes on the first two movies, one of the initial concepts that we discussed, I think in the very first one, is that the ring has the meaning or could have the meaning of it being kind of like the destruction of fascism with the destruction of Sauron and Saruman and the like. Do you think do you still feel that that's fair? And again, and then after you share, I'll give my new sort of a new take.
I think it can go either way. Like I think ultimately it can lead into at least it being like the highest phase of capitalism, which I mean you can't have fascism without capitalism. But I digress. I think that's
No,
what
that
Tolkien was leaning into, but I can definitely see it just being like an overwhelmingly like just capitalist ideology.
yeah, I mean, I think at the time we originally did the first episode, I've read and read more about Tolkien and more of the books, and I think in some articles about, I wish there was more books about like Marxist Tolkien stuff because I would buy and read that. But I think you're right. I think it is the symbol of capitalism, and I don't think that Tolkien meant it this way, but Marx obviously has stated that to get to communism you have to unfortunately suffer through capitalism. And so you could say that the destroying of the ring was like the destruction of that phase. It reaches the new fourth age, which the age of men, the age of whatever.
We can just ignore like the whole like utopian feudal society. We'll just we don't need to get into that. That's too much.
Well, that's the problem. Like the first, like one of the first questions I was going to say or ask is or bring up is that they've destroyed capitalism, fascism, whatever you want to assign to the ring. But is the system that's now in place within their thing? It's you have to kind of separate the two, right? Like you can't because yeah, you're right. Now we just have a feudal.
Within like a fantasy world, like yeah, sure, it could work. Anything can work. But I mean, ultimately, like if we're being like materialist, like using like dialectics, it wouldn't. Like having that like class dynamic. And even though like Aragorn is objectively better than any other like Gondorian king that had come before him because he was like he's kind of like a working class hero in the beginning. He
Yeah,
got to live
he's
under like Elrond before, and he kind of just was one of the men of the North, where he kind of just he worked on the ground. He like knew the people. He actually knew the people that he was around. So I mean, he's
it's
better than the steward.
yeah, and he feel oh gosh, I mean, I do want to talk about him because I didn't remember how great the portrayal is of him in the movie. Like I love that actor, but yeah, Aragon does feel he feels more honorable. Like he actually has honor. Where I feel like even the other kings don't see or other leaders don't really feel that same connection to the people. Like he lived among the proletariat, the fellowship.
He really did. And like even like the people of Gondor, like at the end of the battle of like the Pelennor Fields, like he's going around, he's helping, he's in the House of Healing, he's doing everything he can, like giving people direction, but he's doing it. And he was in the battle too. It wasn't like he was just sitting up eating a feast like the steward like Denethor. He was doing what everybody else was doing. It wasn't there was no difference. They weren't trying to like protect him or anything.
Yeah, Denethor is other than like Sauron and Saruman and maybe some of the orcs, he's like the worst character in
He's almost more despicable than
why do you say
Saruman
that?
or like Wormtongue. I don't know. There's just something about him like intentionally sending his only son left, like Faramir, and then like a bunch of his men just to go die to like retrieve this front, go do this. But really, he just wants him dead because he's
And
mad
then he
that
wants and then
Boromir
he's gonna
died.
burn him.
Yeah, and then he was gonna burn him because he looks into the Palantry, even though like you don't see that in the movie, and he's just like, "Damn, Mordor's they got a lot of people. We ain't gonna make it. I might catch myself on fire." Like
It's almost he's like a revisionist or I don't know.
it's like the definition of like reactionary suicide almost, like where he's
Yeah.
just like, "Yeah, no, I'm not gonna die for the people." And like while his son is being killed, he's just eating. He's just
Yes.
like he's
It's
eating
dripping
because like
down
his
like the
son's
berries
being
are
killed.
dripping down his face. It's such a like they do the flash back and forth between like his son being in battle and going forward. Yeah, and I feel like I feel like Faramir, I think we maybe discussed this in the last movie or episode. Faramir does not get a fair shake in the movies. He doesn't
Not
really
at
get
all.
his due credit. I think there's a couple scenes they added in the extended, but he is cast off as this, oh, you're not Boromir, so you suck.
Yep. He's like the what do they call it in like the royal? You need like the second one is just like the backup. Like they're always just there, just in case the first one does die. Like, oh, at least you have an heir. Like he's just there as a placeholder.
Yeah, and it turns out that Boromir didn't really have as much honor as, I mean, I think it's a little might be slightly different in the book, but he's corrupted by the ring and wants it for
Mhm.
himself. So, I mean, I guess you could say that many of the characters feel that uh, pull by the ring. It's not only Boromir, to be fair, but
And we don't even know if Boromir, when he got to, like, Gondor, if he would have sent Frodo straight to his father, or unlike Faramir, Faramir let him go. He let him and Smeagol go, which would I think that was, like, the big difference, the turning point right there is, like, he did not give in to the ring, and he let it go even though he knew how much it meant to his father.
yeah, I mean, I mean, you could say he saved Middle Earth as much as if he had had the if Denethor had had the ring. I mean, I mean, he probably would have worked with Sauron.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, I think that's why, and it's funny you said revisionist suicide. It's like he is the complete opposite of Huey Newton. Yeah,
Yeah.
the revolutionary suicide.
That was, like, what I thought about. I was like, "Man," 'cause Huey makes note of, like, this quote from Mao where he's like I think Mao in the quotations, Mao says, "All men must die, but death can vary in its significance. To die for the people is, weightier than Mount Tai, but to work for the fascist and for the exploiters and oppressors is light as a feather." So, like, you can tell, like, even between, like, if you compare him to, like, King Theoden, like, his death was much more, like, important and, like, influential than, like, Denethor, like, I don't care if that man died. I'm like, "Oh, oops, caught
Yeah,
himself on fire."
you're like hoping he dies. It's he didn't even he got the death he deserved. I think too is you know in some
And it's
sense.
like, as he should.
Yes,
Really.
that's true. So I know we were talking about like the capitalist aspect of the ring and whatever it is. And briefly, I think we were talking about what comes after. And of course, we want to hope that Aragorn can lead, this peaceful fourth age of, you know, um, prosperity that's not on the backs of, working class, feudal peasants but one thing I was thinking about this in the movie is there's never really any class antagonism. I feel like in the entire trilogy, and I think the only one I could think of, and I got this from an article, which makes sense, is Sam and Frodo being his gardener, calling him
Yes.
Mr. Frodo. There's no other class. I mean, you could say Aragorn was kind of cast off and maybe a man of the people, but do you think that's
That was
true?
really strange. I don't know why. I could be because there's so many different, like, races of beings that, like, adding another layer to that would have been, like, way too much for them to focus on, but, like, you don't really see people in poverty at
No,
all.
never.
And it's very strange. So, I don't know, and they don't even really in the movies focus on Sam being, like, underneath Frodo.
No, they don't. It's kind of meant he's kind of serving him, but it seems like it's his choice in some sense, where he feels like this.
But really, like, he doesn't he live in, like, what's it called? Something Shot Row, like, it's not a nice neighborhood
No,
of Hoppington. Like, it's
no.
not, of the Shire at all.
He's poor. I mean, they don't in the movies again, they don't describe him. And I was actually thinking about this in the Ring of Power, the series. I think that's the only other Lord of the Rings variation other than The Hobbit, where they do show like a town that's kind of impoverished, like a farming town. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe you're right. Maybe they had too many races and making a class structure. Or maybe
They
Tolkien just didn't like
should've.
class. Tolkien didn't like class structure. He didn't believe that there was any materially anything wrong with that.
I think with him, like, overlooking it, because like, his intention of making, like, Lord of the Rings and, like, the Silmarillion, because like, the Silmarillion and all of that jazz was supposed to come out first, but nobody would pick it up because it's like a Bible, like, publishers and whatnot, but he was trying to make, like, a pseudo history for England. Like, that's what he was doing, like a mythology for England. So I think, I don't know, in that way, like, I don't know, like, compared to, like, the Nordic countries where they have, like, all of this really interesting, like, mythology, like, England didn't have that. So he's reaching for, like, to make it magical and didn't
Yeah,
focus enough on it, which I think give it a time, it probably he would've.
it's
That's my
fair.
hope.
I think that's fair. I mean, you could cut him a little slack. I mean, the thing I was discussing the first episode with someone who hadn't listened to it, and I was talking to him, and he has another podcast, uh, the Intervention podcast, and they did an episode on Tolkien's politics. But I didn't want to watch it or listen to it before this. I was like, I want to stay clear in mind of this. But we were talking, and he was saying that the Shire. I think we discussed this in one of the others, that the Shire was kind of symbolizing sort of what, like, the pre-industrialized, gentrified, you know, London that he missed. And so he did want to, that's what he wanted to come home to after his journey. I mean, I think that's not lost on, I think that was intended.
Yeah, that's why, like, they're smaller because, like, when he was a child, like, he was orphaned. Like, all of it, like, his parents, his family died, and then he ended up going off to an orphanage, so he has, like, really fond memories of living in, like, the not greatest part of England. But when you're a kid, even if you're living in poverty, like, you can still make it magical and fun. Doesn't matter where you're at, you know? You kinda have to make the best of what you have when you're a child to, like, get through it. So I can
Right.
get why it is the way it is, like, being able to eat whenever you want or, like, grow whatever you want, being able to
Having seven
explore the
meals.
forest. Yes, 7 meals, hell yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they had lots of potatoes there too, as England would. Yeah, I think that's right. I think I saw something that said he lived in part time in Birmingham, which I think was a super dirty kind of working class town in the United Kingdom. So again, that makes perfect sense. But then also I want to go back with one other thing. So thing with the classes, I saw this in another article about the movies in general, and tell me what you think of this theory. It's that I know we kind of jumped around a little bit, but the fourth age, where we've now eliminated capitalism, we're on our path to communism. Of course, you have to make a little pit stop in feudalist Aragorn realm of, the age of men. But like under Marx's idea of reaching, communism, you have eliminated class structures. So one, is it possible that there's no, obviously this is not intended by Tolkien, but the fact that there are no class structures really shown in that, some of the lore after, and also the fact that Gimli gets taken across, I think, doesn't Legolas build a boat and bring Gimli to the Undying Land? So
Yeah, they almost all of them end up going to the Undying Lands. Like, Sam goes to the Undying Lands, or Aman, um, Bilbo, Frodo, Gandalf, and then Gimli and Legolas.
but I
Like,
think
they all
Gimli
go.
was the first ever dwarf to do it. And so the theory in
Yeah.
this article was like, well, they've now transcended class, race, because everyone is kind of equal in some sense. Of course, it's not exactly the case, because I feel like they weren't just letting anyone into the Undying Lands. But I don't know. Maybe that's a stretch.
It could be. I mean, it's like how people say that, like, heaven is or Jesus was a communist, like, heaven is communism, like, that's what, like, Christians strive for, and essentially, like, with his background, it would make sense, like, with them transcending and going to the Undying Lands. Like, there's no need for there to be, like, these hierarchies. They don't really exist in Tolkien's theory as much. Like, they're different, like, power levels, like, we're doing power scaling, yeah, sure, but they all live amongst each other from what I've understood.
No, and that makes sense too, given his religious background. I wasn't thinking about that too. Is that the end goal would be everyone is kind of equal under the Lord, or whatever you want to say,
Under the
in his
Vala.
mind, under, yeah, in his sense. Um, yeah, I think I asked you this before when we were talking briefly, is with the ring destroyed and Aragorn is kind of in power, like, is there no more evil, like, in the quotation marks? Because of course there's going to be bad people, and there's still violence, but like, how do you, again, it's fantasy. There's no, everything is cool.
If we wanna go back to, like, the lore of it, like, the destruction of the ring was so important because it meant that Sauron could never ever again take physical form, which is why it needed to get nipped in the butt because they already had experience in like the first age or like before the first age ended with the death of like Melkor and Morgoth. Like they knew how destructive, like because they're intrinsically evil beings because they're supposed to like represent Satan, you know. But I mean, in that sense, yeah, like evil would dissipate. I don't know though. Like when it comes to like, I think class dynamic would probably be the next thing to be focused on. That's
Yeah.
the only thing I can think of. Like, why not? Because then they wouldn't be focused on like this greater evil. Now they can actually focus on themselves and, you know,
Yeah.
having a
That's
revolution against Aragorn, I guess.
well, I mean, that's the thing that you kind of look at with a feudal society. As long as, you know, the people at the they're still at bottom are fed and happy, you know, if he can actually provide for them, presumably they won't need to revolt and
We
create
need to pull out like angles on authority to see
yes.
whether that's a just or unjust authority.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is that he doesn't there is like a line of kings, of course. He's the heir to the throne, but I don't remember. Do they is like the is the is like the is there like a considered like a divine right of kings within like the story from the previous
Yeah,
ages?
it's like a like the blood. It's like pretty traditional, I think, with like it goes down like the family line. So
Yeah,
he's of Isildur's, you know, family tree. So it would be him that would be next. Plus, he's like, I think he's Numenorian because then there's
I
that whole
believe
other
so.
like. There's so much to it, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Oh,
Like it's
the only
his
reason I
right.
yeah, the only reason I was thinking that is because if the people below in the sort of class structure are view him as this vessel of, you know, from God, or as this whatever you want to say, as like the divine right of kings, it would eventually lead to them presumably finding some reason to dislike or distrust or not being taken care of. And again, that's the thing that's sort of left out of all of his this trilogy is just that class structure, as we've already said.
It's almost like a good thing in a sense because then it gives us a lot of wiggle room where we can apply like some really like stretched allegories and whatever we want to it. It's not too concrete, but it does it at the same time it makes it hard because I just don't know. It sucks. I just don't know, and I wish there was more on it.
Yeah. The what was I just gonna I had a quote that I thought was interesting, but now I didn't like write down I know it's around the time that we meet Denethor, and he said I think it might be that Gandalf says it, he says that wisdom is born out of the west, wisdom born out of the west was forsaken, the king made tombs more splendid than the house of the living. No, I think it was Denethor was telling this to one of the hobbits.
It might have been Pippin.
Was it Pippin when he's sitting there eating his chicken, watching Hitler? Like the, I don't remember. I'd have to look up this exact quote, but basically it's the idea that I think that's Denethor. Maybe it was. Sorry, I don't know why I said Denethor. I just combined two names, but Denethor basically decided to make things. I think I wrote this quote down because he's saying that they started to make tombs that were more splendid than the houses of the living. And so the children of Lord sat in these huge halls. So they were describing, in some sense, that the leaders in Gondor were actually forsaking their people instead of and having elaborate shit they didn't need.
I think it makes sense because once um what was it? Was it Valinor when they pulled the Vala pulled Valinor out of the sea, and that's where like all like the Numenorians and stuff were residing, and then they ended up turning away from the Vala, and instead of having these really long lives where they could like just enjoy being alive, they reduced their lifespan over time, and then they started focusing more on wealth and luxury. So it would make
Right.
sense why that
Yeah.
is because they're not living these long lavish lifestyles so they like filled the void with pretty things.
Yeah, so it was Gandalf saying it to Pippin. I think it's when they're riding up to the top to see the Denethor at some point, like between when they first meet him, and maybe it's when he's about to burn his son or something like that, and he's lament. I mean, Gandalf is this interesting character, which I also wanted to talk about. Is he goes off because he's feeling it's like he's no longer needed. He's like, we've succeeded in the task that I was brought to Middle Earth for, hundreds and thousands of years ago. So you kind of feel happy for Gandalf. He's like he can finally rest.
Yeah.
Poor
He just had
guy.
a battle of Balrog and like transcend time and live 1,000 lifetimes. He's like, yeah, I'm done now.
Yeah, like how many times does he have to have his staff destroyed and all these, and he's always like this. There was a point where I actually, I think in this movie, I wanted to say he was like giving up on Frodo. Like he thought he was done for. And I think Aragorn is like the one person through all of the movies that I feel like has the most faith in him because he lets him leave in the first film or in the first go off on his own. Aragorn, I think, deserves his. I think I've said a bunch of different random things together, but Gandalf deserves his time off. He gets him on vacation, and Aragorn deservingly deserves praise for his faith in like humanity. Like he's the only one that seems to have faith in men.
Yeah, at the end of the day, he is the only one that thinks that like they can actually like do this thing. Which is why I think after they have the battle on the Pelennor fields and they're like gonna go on the suicide mission, he's like, no, we gotta buy Frodo time. We gotta draw those all of the orcs out so that they can like pass through the valley. And I think in the yeah, it was him, right? In the
Yeah,
movie that he says that. I don't know if that was
yeah. His
extended
he has that
edition
big
stuff or
speech.
not.
He has the big speech. That scene is not in the. That scene is longer in the extended edition. Like they don't have the mouth of Sauron come out,
Hmm.
which is such a shame because that's such a funny. Like I can't help but laugh at that little mouth. The mouth, it's very his little like smirk. But yeah, I think they needed that scene in the original too. I think it was a shame that it had to be shortened. But you're right. He was willing to give his life even if he died and the line of Isildur ended, so long as the ring was destroyed, it was worth it. I mean, they all were
Yeah.
giving their lives.
Yeah, like it was all of the boys. It was like Eomer was there, Pippin was there, like all of these really important people. Like Gandalf was ready. He was just like, well, if we can get it done. And there was Gimli says something. It was like small chance of success. I'm in. Like he knew it was
Oh,
he's just a goober.
he always has the little the funny. I think that was also not in the original edition either. That was an extended edition. I think I saw something that said that they added some like little lighthearted humor in a scene of where they're literally about to give their lives to the cause.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty
Um,
much.
I wrote this little note down, which I think is kind of random. But so after Sauron is destroyed, the ring goes in and it melts, and we start seeing the tower comes down and the volcano erupts. I was thinking that the volcano erupting, kind of destroying what's below, was like a metaphor for like Noah's Ark, but that could be a stretch. I don't know because I don't know because they're sitting on the rock waiting for the birds to come in. I don't know.
It kind of is. Like, I can see where you're going. I saw that in your notes, and I was like, "What does this mean?" But I
Well,
see it. I see what you mean.
oh, I mean, I guess it doesn't really destroy all of Earth. It just destroys Mordor, so it's not really. But I guess
Mhm.
eventually you could. Don't they say? I think in that like the rocks and ash from volcanoes is like the most fertile soil. So like in the fourth age, fifth age, someone will move back to Mordor and
Yeah, I mean,
build
there was people
anew.
there before, and then
Right, like the first and second age, maybe. I don't know if it was the
I
second.
think so. It was, like, after the first age, like, second
Okay,
age, I think.
I mean it was a fertile land. It
Well,
wasn't like
something.
it was this. It just
Mhm.
became his I don't really know the exact history of.
It's kinda like how Saruman, like, leached the ground of all its life.
And
I
so
think it's, like, the same thing.
presumably he would choose a place that's super fertile, below a volcano. So I guess that makes Makes sense. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
what they knew about volcanic ash when Tolkien wrote this. I guess they knew about that.
I think
Um,
it has to do with like Mountain Dew because he could forge rings in it. Like
right.
there's some less magical property to it. I'm sure. I can't validate that, but it seems
No.
right.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it's so I wrote this in my notes too about the rings. So we obviously had there were 20 rings, and it was given to each of the different, races, men, elves, and so on, had their rings. It seemed like at that time that did create more of a class structure than when there was like the one ring. I don't know. Does that make? I guess that there was more like the bourgeoisie of the different, you know, the haves or the have-nots. Like all the different races had a hierarchy, but once there was only one ring left, it was like that's became like the fascist capitalist symbol of all of them.
Yeah, pretty much. Like the three Elven rings, I mean, they kind of exist a little bit outside of it because they made sure not to put theirs on, like the one that like Galadriel, Gandalf, and Elrond have. But I think it was Celebrimbor who had two of the rings, and it was Galadriel that had one. So they like didn't put theirs on. They didn't participate in that because they knew something was up with it.
The elves are smart.
They were very they had a lot. Elrond had like the gift of like foresight. A lot of them did. So they kind of like they knew something was going on. But like with the men, I think it gave them longer lives and more prosperity. And like the same thing happened with like the dwarves. Like they didn't become so infatuated with power as they did with like they used it to get like minerals and like gold and whatnot. And then it attracted the dragons. And that
Yeah.
ended up being their demise. So it was still greed, but it wasn't power greed. It was just like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned greed because this article that I read that I'll put in the show notes was called "Greedy Like Gollum: Middle Earth According to Marx," which I got some of these ideas, and that's what the article kind of summary was, that the greed of the rings created sort of the ultimate ring at the end, because eventually all of the powers, all the parties, if you want to use like a modern democratic type institution, eventually those parties are going to side and move towards capital, the highest stage of, a fascist dictator or
oh,
whatever you
like the
want to call
ring,
it.
like monopolizing on all of the other rings.
Right, right. So I guess, thinking of the rings as symbolizing sort of the different groups or factions or whatever it is, and they all became one because it was the most powerful. The one ring to rule them all, as the tagline. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
ruling
that's
all of the bureaucrats.
yeah. I mean, as if Sauron really, he cared about he wasn't one for bureaucracy. He just, sent his orcs out to do his
Yeah, he
bidding.
wanted to just usurp all of the land so he could have power over it. And that's like a common misbelief. It's that people think that Sauron was just gonna like decimate the land, but he really just wanted to rule over it all in his way, but be the
Right.
only one to do it.
But he would be willing to destroy some people who opposed him, of
Oh,
course.
of course.
Yeah, yeah, if a few people, what is it, the movie, like, if some people may die, but that's just a risk he has to take, or whatever, I don't know.
Oh, I think that's Shrek.
Yeah, right.
His Lord
It's like some people may die. Sauron is the king, and
but
the,
that's
the
a
king
risk
from
I am willing to make.
yeah, that's I think that's actually, I don't think I knew that until more recently. I sort of, I think there's like that. I think it's just the idea of, like, in most people's heads, of like the evil person. Think of like Hitler that just wants to destroy everything, but really they just want absolute power over
Yeah,
everyone.
that's like another thing you can think about. It's like different like white supremacist ideologies. Like they're not looking to like decimate the population. They're looking to subjugate people under their
Eugenics.
power. Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
I mean, that's what I mean. Sauron also was like breeding, men and orcs to create these, like, a super race. I mean, he was basically doing some eugenics. I think we
Yeah,
talked
he
about that.
was. He changed like all he captured elves and like changed them into darker beings because he couldn't make elves. So it's like his.
Right. Is that they don't really, again, I don't want to talk much about the rings of power, but the elf that sort of works for Sauron in that, is that what it's meant to be? Like a
The
hybrid elf?
Uruk-hai?
Yeah,
I think so. I think he's one of the experimentations. But yeah, like what Sauron does, and like I think it was originally maybe Melkor that started it. Sorry, Lucas is trying to come in here.
oh no.
Thank you. But like the trolls were supposed to be like the opposite of the Ents, and like the orcs were supposed to be the opposite of like the elves. And then there's like the goblins, even though they don't really talk about goblins that much in like the main trilogy. It's more so like the Hobbit. But it's supposed to be like the antithesis or whatever
Yeah, no,
of
I see what
those.
you're saying, of like the yin and yang of each of them. Like this is the one that
Mhm.
will destroy the, not destroy, I guess, but to creating his evil version of each of those things. Yeah, I mean that's, I mean all of the, I mean I think sadly of, obviously the US is not innocent in these kind of experiments, but I mean look at all the things that we do, MK Ultra and the Nazis and all the things they did to create master, I mean it was, that was their idea. I mean not master
Well, it's
race.
like even if we didn't like genetically alter like human beings, like how we combat terrorists is with like our global police. It's not that
Right.
far fetched. And even though like we have what some 200 bases spread across, maybe even more across the world,
I think it's like,
like
I think it's like 500 plus, which is insane.
yeah, it's wild. We don't even need to genetically modify anyone. We just like we got to go find our freedom in X country.
Yeah, that's true. We, it's, well, I guess the modification is simply your mind through,
It's just
propaganda.
perception. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's scary.
Yeah, that's beyond, perhaps beyond the the lore of the Lord of the Rings. Uh
Didn't mean to take it that far,
no,
Sometimes you just gotta send it.
that's fair. I think the only other like big note that I wrote in sort of my questions, I think we already kind of talked about it, of, the rebuilding of the Shire. I think I mentioned at the beginning of it is, you know, the idea of rebuilding the Shire in the book, obviously not in the movie. They did it out of a desire to still live under the same type of society. They could have just, they probably, Aragorn probably would have welcomed the hobbits into the rest of, Gondor if their home was destroyed, but they believed in their way of life. And I think it's what you would say, to people who say like, oh, under communism no one will want to like be do these like menial jobs. Like, well, actually they will, because they live in a society that everything needs to be done for the collective will. And I think that's what the hobbits represent.
They do, and I think you see it a lot with, like, Sam planting the tree that he got from Galadriel right next to the party tree that had gotten cut down to, like,
Yep.
rebirth it and start anew. Like, that was a really powerful imagery in the book.
And it's in like this, the, I don't know if there's, I don't know if there's a name for that part of the Shire, but it's like the communal garden, or is it?
That's where
I don't know.
yeah, it's like the party tree, like, they all just, like it's a big field, I think, where they do things, they host events.
Yeah, because
Nobody
that's,
owns it, but it's for vibes, I guess.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they. Well, I mean, it's also, you mentioned how Frodo sold, his home when he leaves, which they don't. That whole, like the beginning of the very first book is much longer than they cared to include in the movie for valid reason. But it's interesting. This will be interesting in my mind. I don't think there is any, again, because Tolkien decided to ignore, property rights and class structures. But how the hobbits would organize, like, do they really, they have their homes, they have their own toothbrush, but they share everything else amongst, you know the people, because
Yeah, for the most part, like, I think when it comes to, like, money and value, I mean, the only reason that Bilbo had so much was, like, his house was really nice because his family, like, they were, like, architectures or architects, and then he got all of the gold and whatnot from the dwarves when he went off to defeat Smaug.
right.
So and, like, gold in, like, Marxist term is, like, when you're that human labor that it takes to extract this fine resource. That's why it's so valuable. So money isn't like our paper currency to them. So it actually does hold like physical labor value to money, I
Right.
think.
They don't really say what happens to all of the fortune, do they? Like all of, I guess, because Bilbo gives all of his fortune and possessions mostly to Frodo, and it just kind of it should be used as the collective. I guess in the book it's all destroyed or stolen by Saruman, or do we know?
I'm trying to remember. Like I know he leaves Frodo with a lot, but then he takes some of it when like the dwarves come to help him move him to like Rivendell after his birthday party.
I guess he does
But
need some because he lives a lavish
but he
lifestyle.
also he spent a lot of it so he could buy like everybody in the Shire presents for his birthday.
That's right. Well, that's the whole thing. In the Shire, they give presents to the people who come to your birthday, right? And he had such a big
Yeah.
party, he had to give everyone a present.
And he's like catering it and all of that. So I'm sure that like was a big dent
Yeah, that's
in his
true.
life.
That's true. Um, Trying to see if other things that I noted here. Da, 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 da. I have like I looking at my notes as I was watching the movie, which are different than like my sort of question notes, and some of the things are so funny. Like I wrote, when does Frodo like how did Frodo think that like one calf skin of water was going to make it like two and back? Because like they're drinking from the water and like, oh, how are we're not going to have enough to make it back because like he's drinking the last little drop, like the driplets from Sam's
Mhm.
bag. I'm like, was it like a magic calf skin? Was there like did the water
See,
multiply?
like it because it doesn't make sense in the movies, but like when you're reading through the book, like Sam is like on the hunt for water. He's like, if it's
That's
a muddy
true.
puddle, I'm gonna drink it. Like
Yeah,
he does not care. He's like, we're gonna make it. And then towards the end, there's like, I don't know, 4 days left, and there's no more water. So he's just like, we ain't making it back. I'm sorry, boys. Like,
yeah. Well, they I mean they show them like pretty disheveled, like their lips are all chapped and gross when they're making the final climb up the hill.
oh, I know it's all
It
yucky.
made me really uncomfortable. Like in like horror movies, like the physical gore is always more gross to me than actual like violence. I don't know why.
They turned into like the dehydrated SpongeBob meme.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Oh, I know what I was going to mention, and then I see if you have other things to bring up. But at the very end of the movie, or I guess not the very end of the movie, the end of the ring, when Frodo is fighting with Smeagol, is it fair to say that Frodo only succeeds by accident? In his like little fight, he bites off his finger and they're kind of fighting and he's actually going to leave. Like he can't do it. He can't physically drop the ring in. Is it so powerful that no one can destroy it if not by accident?
I see that it could either be like by accident because in the movie, like it's a very much like it seems like an accident, and then even in the book, like oh Smeagol's like dancing around and then he's just like
Right.
slips over the edge,
Right. In
or
the movie
either
they
it's
make him push him.
like divine fate where it was just meant to be that way the whole time. I don't
Yeah.
know though, because like you can tell like the ring, it almost is like Sauron's like will is going into like panic mode. And he's like, I gotta pull out all the stops right this second. I can't be destroyed.
Right.
Like his
It's
will, he's willing it, he knows what's going on. And you can see in the movie when like the searchlight.
yeah, like the yeah, I think it's funny how I mean they had to visually make it seem cool, but I think in the books it's not like the same eye kind of thing. It's more of a
It's just like symbolism. Like
right.
they have the eye on like their clothes, but in this was just like giant flaming eye.
Which is funny. So I think right before we started recording, there's this quote from Tolkien when they're asked him about allegory, and he says, "quote I cordially dislike allegory in all its manifestations, and have always done so," referring to the ring. But it's funny that they have that quote being like, "You can't compare my. I'm not doing any of this allegory stuff." But Peter Jackson's like, "You know what? I'm gonna make a little allegory of Sauron to this little like searchlight, like a."
I know, and you almost like it makes sense, like kind of like I get why he did it, but at the same time, it's so silly.
It's really dumb.
Because it's
But
like a cat eye, and then it like squinches and it gets bigger.
yeah, and it like literally like it can turn on like when they're climbing, and Sam tells him to like drop down because it's you'd think that if he had such a presence for the ring, he would know where it was. He wouldn't need to like use his little light to look for it, right?
Right. Especially it's in his domain. It's in where he's at. He has to know.
He's also stupid for not leaving a few orcs behind when they all went out for the final battle.
Now
Like
he's
he
like
didn't leave a
so
couple.
up his own ass with like power, and he's just like, no, I'm just gonna nip it in the butt. Like he can't see past like his own greed. It blinds him to the fact that it could be a diversion.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think right. Well, I think the fact that Aragorn shows himself to him, he has to destroy the one person. I think it's almost, even if Frodo fails, Aragorn could take up the mantle and find the ring and destroy it himself, perhaps.
Yeah, if it didn't reunite with Sauron. But even I
Yeah.
don't know. It would take him a while to like, because there's like fan theories on like what happened if like Sauron did in fact get the ring, and like he wouldn't be like full power. Like he'd be really strong, but it would take a while for him to like get back up.
Well, how would it be even, how would he obtain it in, I guess in the movie it will be, again, it's a,
So I think one of the theories is that like if Schmeagol like didn't do anything, you can kind of see it in the. I think it's in the movie. Like the Nazgul are all flying back and racing back to Mount Doom as
yes,
soon as they know
yes.
that that's happening. So the Nazgul would get the ring and then deliver it to Sauron, and then he would become one, and then
Like his
that
body
would be like
like
how
be
I
rebuilt,
guess
like the body
like
of Christ or something.
maybe they like chuck it at the. I have no idea how he would become whole again. But
He puts it inside the little eye and it like
maybe,
spouts
yeah.
arms. I don't know.
But theoretically, that's what
Right.
could have happened.
Yes. Tolkien did not give us he did not consider the possibility of Frodo failing.
Thank goodness. He had a lot of hope in Frodo as like an author. As I feel like if I was writing that and I like built up this really strong character, I don't know if I would have hope at that point. It just seems like so impossible.
Yeah, I mean throughout the both the Hobbit and this, I mean, the hobbits, despite being physically small, like do the most, some of the most heroic things. I think is kind of like the point of both the trilogy and the Hobbit.
I think that's why they like show so much of Schmeagol and Deagle at the beginning of the this movie, like Return of the King, is you can see that like the hobbits are just really strong and they're really resilient against the ring's power. Because even though like Schmeagol like killed Deagle, he just went off into the mountains. He didn't do anything. He didn't try to like take power over people.
No, he just wanted the shiny thing for himself, not knowing really what he had, which I think is,
Mhm.
yeah, I hadn't thought about that. But could Smeagol have conceivably like create like been powerful?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think hobbits are capable of it because, like, even Bilbo had it for like what, like 50 years, and it didn't really do a whole lot to him. It just like made him live longer. Like he didn't really know what he had. He just thought
It's
it was a
like
fun party trick
you needed evil in your heart, or like the will to have like dominion over someone, like
because they lived in like their little like aggro commune communal society. They were able to exist outside of like the greed of like men.
yeah, Denethor, if he had it, he would have built his own army and great strength and power. But yeah, that's a
Bilbo's like,
that's
haha, I disappeared. Like, but
right,
it's a
right.
fundamental difference.
Is that the only time he supposedly puts on the ring? I wonder. No, he must have put it
Well,
on
he put it
before.
on when he was trying to get away from Schmeagol
Oh, right,
in
right.
The Hobbit, and then he puts it on a couple of times, and he does it like Mary knew about it, Pippin knew about it, I think, like the ring. They'd seen him do it. Like he'd get bored and just like put it on,
Yeah. What
I
was the
guess. But he
other?
was also probably speaking to him.
Yeah, I was just thinking about something with um I think I lost it. Um, but were there any like notes or things from just from the movie itself, or the this that you noted that are worth that you wanted to bring up?
Okay, I will say, I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, they'll be like, it's the Lord of the Rings, but it's only, like, the moments where, like, women are talking, and it's, like, a 2-second clip." But, like, meanwhile, Tolkien made Arwen, like, the most goated character, like, the Shield Maiden, Arwen, where she,
Yeah.
like, kills the Witch King. She's the only one to kill a Nazgul. She really, like, gaslight, gatekeep, girl bossed her way through that. Pretended she was a
Yes.
man, Joan of Arc it. But that was
Yeah,
it. That was,
she
like,
is
the
a
only.
so the movie fails the Bechdel test in with high. It doesn't even have like there really no she's like her there's only really three female characters in the entire trilogy.
Mhm.
Galadriel, Erwin, and
Arwen?
Arwen. That's it.
Pretty
Like
much.
like they
That's
have, Sam when he marries at the end. Other than that, really, it's like we're not
I'm
gonna.
happy they at least made them very strong characters. Like, I wish Arwen would have had more because she is strong. She's like a child of Elrond. Like, she very much has power,
Yeah.
but they didn't really do it. And like Galadriel,
Oh,
she's too powerful.
there was
Galadriel
one.
and is like one of the only people that could actually wield the ring for good.
Yes, yes. She and I really like her like opening arc in the prequel show. Like I think they really make her a very strong character, even if she isn't always the perfect judge of character. If no spoilers to that show if you haven't seen it. I also wrote a note down. Was Eowyn pregnant in that in the movie?
Like the actress?
The character.
I don't
I
think
don't.
so because she doesn't get married to Faramir until after her brother gets married or gets turned into king after the funeral.
I don't know why I wrote that note. For some reason, I did. I wrote that note being like, "Is she pregnant?" Question mark. But I think it must have been when they were fighting. Um, but yeah. What was I gonna also write? Oh, I think I sent you that little my comparison to the dim hole under the mountain to the Sarah Mass um a court of thorn and roses. Like the under the mountain is both like a the that sort of little imagery is used in both of these.
There's so much. There's so much. I'm pretty sure she was a Tolkien fan. There's no way. I feel like there's too many overlapping themes. And I'll have to get into it off of this because there's I don't want to
I
distract
haven't
too
finished. I
much.
haven't finished the whole thing, but I'm almost done with the
Oh,
set. Yeah, I've been reading other books and I've only through almost two. So
it's just like interesting how like fantasy, like authors of fantasy, like use it as like a tool or like a device to like make sense of like the material reality that you live in.
well, I'm reading the Wizard and Earthsea not trilogy. It's like series, and I was talking to my daughter because I was like, oh, you probably would like this book. It's a fantasy trilogy or not trilogy. I keep saying trilogy, fantasy series, and the first book of the series is about like a boy who goes to be a wizard in a wizard school, and I'm like, this is clearly what Harry Potter was kind of pulled from. I mean, and then I said like, "Oh, she's copying," and then she's like, said like, "Well, it's not really copying. You're just kind of using the ideas for another book because she likes Harry Potter."
Mhm.
Well, won't blame her for that, I guess.
It's probably
Um,
like a better version of Harry Potter, honestly.
well, I've read almost the first book and it's much better. I mean, it's the writing is also significantly better. I mean, Ursula the Queen is like Gwyn. I don't know how is yeah, she's much better writer than yeah, JK Rowling. Well, I can't remember anyone or pronounce anyone's names. Um, but yeah, I think after I finished that series, I'm curious if I'm sure someone's written articles. There's probably like a Reddit subreddit about like comparisons between the trilogy and other like fantasy
There's
series.
gotta be. I'm convinced though. There's some like what are those? The spider web graphs of like things connecting.
Again, I don't
Give me a year. I'll find it. I'll make it.
Yeah, well, they're gonna. I'm excited to see that the series they have eventually for that book.
And better be good. It better
Yeah,
be good.
I mean, I don't. Is it? I don't remember if it's Amazon or Netflix, but
It's
Amazon is.
Hulu.
Oh, is it Hulu? Oh, that gives me a little bit of pause. Well, I don't know. What do I know?
Well, they were saying that it's being held up because she was being too difficult. It's like, what does that mean? It's her material. Like, does she not
Well,
have the
you
right
think
to
of
like
his.
make as she wants?
Well, I guess I wonder if they want to like change stuff because it's challenging, and she's like, "No, we're not going to do that," which is good. Hold out for your.
Yeah.
Don't let them change your work. If she's
Do
alive,
we
at least
think
she. Oh, go ahead.
Tolkien would approve of his movies?
I saw something about like a not like deeply in theory about this, but how like someone who is super ingrained in all of his work, what they would think. I would say he'd like it. I think Peter Jackson did them pretty. If you include the extended editions, I think it's yeah. I give it like an A minus in comparison to the books.
I agree. I think they're really good. I know some people don't like it at all. I don't know why. There's people who are
There's
like
always
diehards
haters.
and they just
There are always haters. I mean, they I mean, all of the acting is really good. All of the like considering when they made these in the early 2000s, it's like pretty there isn't that much special effects. It's like good practical effects and fun. Yeah. If you don't like these movies but you love Tolkien, I feel bad for you. I don't
right.
know. I
Well, it's
don't
like
know.
what else do you have to go off of the animated version? Like that's not
No, that's not even all of the books, right? It's not the whole.
I think it's just The Hobbit, isn't it? Or is it the whole Lord of the
No, I think
Rings?
you're right. I think it's just The Hobbit. They never did the Lord of the Rings. Peter Jackson came in and did a whole thing. Um, I don't think I have any more notes in my. I feel like I wrote way more than I did.
I just wrote a bunch of random lore. Like I got pages of lore. Like if we're gonna talk about the tree and Gondor, I got it. And we got all of this other stuff, but I didn't know how. Like it
well,
doesn't
no, I mean,
pertain to
yeah.
Marxist ideology. It's just it's
Well,
here
no, but what's the lore of the tree?
in
Is
Gondor. Let me pull it out because I wrote it down.
no, we
So you see a lot of like the flowers start to like bloom as like Elendil or less whatever like his fancy name is Strider
yeah,
before he's like king as he gets closer. But like the tree itself, like back at the beginning, there was two trees. I don't know if you've ever seen the two trees of like I think it was in Valinor. Like there was two trees of light
yeah.
and
Wait, not wait
Melkor.
in Numenor or in Valinor?
I think it was in Valinor.
Okay,
But there's two trees of light, and I don't remember their names. But one was a male and a female, and they cast like this beautiful like there was no sun. Like the Vala had to create a sun because Melkor took Osgiliath, no, Ungoliant, which is Shelob's mother, to consume them, like the light from them. So they had to like reconcile that, create a moon and sun. But there was a seed, right? And like I see it like it got passed down. It ended up going to like Numenor, and they have a tree, and you kind of see it in the Rings of Power. There's
yeah.
that tree, but Sauron convinces them to cut it down because it was like symbolic of like their unity and like appreciation for the elves and like the higher beings. But he's like, nah, cut it down. You can just worship me and Melkor. And and then Isildur takes the seed and he brings it over to like the mainland.
Oh
And then
man,
like
that's awesome.
that all of these seeds like keep like there's a couple other trees that end up getting made, but then you see in the book, um, they ended up at the very end. Gandalf takes Strider to find like this little sapling, and it is the same tree. So he takes it, and they get to replant it, and they have like a burial for the big white tree. So it's like I think it's called Nimroth. It's an ancestor of Nimroth, the tree.
Well, trees have
If
a
you
lot
didn't
of
know, you
sim.
know.
I mean, I think there's a lot of tree symbology. Again with Sam planting the tree, the little nut in the Shire, and you have the Ents, which are like a mystical tree. I feel like he really liked tree
And
lore.
it's like really important to like the elves and like their culture and their religion. Like trees are
Well, in the
trees
Ring
are
of Power
guarded.
too, you have in the Ring of Power, you have like the tree that's starting to die, which is the elf's power too. Which I think, again, it's all like it all has like that interconnection within all the different parts of Middle Earth, which I think also is like what perhaps I wonder if that's why Sauron is digging underground. I mean, obviously the orcs need to be underground, but it's like he's destroying like the roots of these of like power of like the
Mhm.
of good. I don't know.
Which is like the Vala like created that life. So it would make sense just to wipe it clean.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
Hmm. That's pretty cool though. I like that. Is there any of the other any what's a well I want to know what other lore did you someone I was talking with someone today, the same person today of that intervention podcast, and they were like, they appreciated the lore that was brought in the other episodes too. So I think we need to.
Uh I mean like there's like the mouth of Sauron being like one of the Black Numenorian. I know a lot of really random things about
Oh,
Lord of
so
the Rings.
that's what his the mouth is from. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but he's from the Third Age, but he doesn't remember his own name. But there was also like a lady who was like one of the who was a Black Nomenorian who married one of the kings of Gondor, and she was like evil and she didn't like it there, and she ended up having like her own castle in Osgiliath. And she had all of these cats. She had all these black cats that would like spy for her, and she had a white cat that would spy on the black cats. And then she ended up going into exile. And the last thing they saw of her was her on this boat in the ocean with her cats. That's canon. That is real Tolkien lore. I can't remember what her name is, but yep. I'll
The
have to
crazy cat
send it
lady.
to you. I know. I'm like, why is this in here? Like, why is this relevant? Why did he feel the need to write this down?
I mean, I guess if you're writing that much, building that much of a world, like you, some stuff you don't want to cut, but it might not. It's,
Yeah, pretty much.
he just created one big extended edition. He's like, no, we're not going to cut anything. It's all going in.
I literally have like two shelves over here that are just Tolkien literature. It's crazy, like how much stuff that he has.
Yeah, he really. I think I was looking on Goodreads earlier. I was looking at like different editions, and like there's like 20 pages of like if you go to his as an author, like looking through like page two, page three, page four. Like I didn't realize how much he had. I know
And it
some of
just
them are like
came.
different editions.
There's another one that just got published this year that Christopher was like working on, like his son. I can't remember what it's called, but it's another piece of Tolkien lore.
Yeah, the one that I was going to order it. I haven't ordered it yet. It was the Children of Hurrying. Is that how you
Hmm.
pronounce it? I haven't read that. I want to read that one. There's a few here, and like the Tales of Numenor also sounds really awesome because I feel like you don't get much, you don't get anything in this because it's destroyed at this point.
I'm gonna show you my favorite one though, because it's very cute. It's my favorite piece of.
It's not. Is it the Unfinished Tales of Numenor? No.
Whoops. No, it's Jesus, like it's the Tom Bombadil book.
Oh,
It's the Adventures of Tom Bombadil, and it is darling. It has really nice artwork, but it's just like his work in riddles and poetry about Tom Bombadil because Tom didn't get any airtime in that
no.
movie, and he should have.
Well, I think he probably he wrote poetry too. He has like I feel like he'd be a good like writer of like limericks.
He wrote poetry. He came up with like four different languages. You know, he's an interesting dude. Like, not a lot of authors can say that they like invented languages.
Yeah, the only other I'm trying to think of any other stories where there was a creation of a new language. I guess in like the Star Trek, but that wasn't really a book so much as I don't know if
He
it's a
wrote
full one.
books.
I don't know. I'm not as deep into the Trekkie. Like I've watched the shows and such, but that's about as far as I go.
Yeah.
But So I will ask you this. What would be your a summation of the Lord of the Rings if you have one?
Like,
That's a very broad. I don't know that does that.
what do you I was like, what do you mean by that? Do you mean, like, if I were to, like, do a TLDR, like, if somebody had never seen the movies before,
No,
or,
well, no,
like
well, no. Let me
or, like,
read.
the
Let me.
overwhelming theme or allegory?
Yeah, I guess what would you yeah, I guess that's more what I meant. It's like if we've talked about like different themes of the book and the rings and different things, but if you put it all like in a tidy little bow, that's a big
I think that The Lord of the Rings does a really fantastic job at showing why, um, when you aim and work towards doing things for the collective, you have better success than when you like revert to individualism. And I think you see that a lot with like the vanguard of like the Lord of the Rings, which is like the hobbits, the main four, um, Legolas, Gimli, Aragorn, and Gandalf. Like they all represent different peoples, and because of that, they're able to unite people of a variety of different races in Middle Earth to rally against something evil, which there is not a lot of unity. And you see that a lot in the Return of the King with how the orcs treat each other. You see that when Sam is rushing up to the tower, like how they just cut each other down. There's no real solidarity there. So, solidarity, doing things for the benefit of the collective and quote unquote greater good is like the overwhelming theme of Lord of the
yeah.
Rings.
No, I think that's I think that pretty sums it up. It's like you could use their it's a revolutionary they have revolutionary optimism that kind of brings them through to the end despite overwhelming odds, right? You know, like they
Yes, it is Gandalf that says hope is kindled after they light the beacon, and I think that's
yeah, I wrote that one down too. And there's another Gandalf always has these like little nuggets of like wisdom. I mean, he's Gandalf, of course he does. He's been living forever. But he has that he brings them well, I guess you could say he brings them together and he's sort of like the leader of the vanguard if
he's like the principled Marxist, the one that's read all 3 volumes of Capital, like, that's what he is.
yes. Yeah. Gandalf has definitely read all 3 volumes like multiple times. He's quoting volume 3. He's quoting their like Marx's take on NFTs,
He
you know.
knows, like, volume 4, even though it never came out, like, he's got
He should write volume 4, Gandalf. He could just give us well, I guess now that capitalism has been destroyed in the ring, we can use well, no, he can write his own Marxist theory, Gandalf theory.
Gandalf theory, anarcho Gandalfism.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think I mean I speak for myself, I suppose. That I think we did the movies and the books and these justice in the Marxist lens. So
I sure hope so. It has been a work over the last 6 months, like, going through the books and learning a lot of lore, and then also reading supplementary theory to accompany it. This is not something that we just, like, woke up one day and we're just like, let's just, like, record this." Like, a lot of work went
no,
into
no,
making these.
it is absolutely true. I think it's a labor of love because Marxism and Lord of the Rings are both, and I think they fit together. I think some things when on this podcast, movies might not have the best. The analysis is thin, like I did Idiocracy. It's a little bit thin, but I think Lord of the Rings deservingly so, given what it's I think brought to people and brought to all the things that have been brought from it, all the stories and copycats, and and I say that in a nice way of
Yeah.
copycats. The the lore has brought new material to everyone. What is Sam's last line? I wrote it down. In the what's the very last line of the movie? I'm gonna
Isn't
have
it
to
like
cut
I've come
this.
home
Is it I've come home? I thought so.
or something? It's something like
The journey
I
home, or
forget.
I know that's not what he says, but yeah. I don't know what the last line in the book is, but I was gonna try and make it poetic there, but I blew it. It's I was too ingrained in all the other my notes and things, but I will put in the show notes some of these little articles and things that I missed from some of the other episodes. But I
Maybe in a
think
year after we've consumed more theory, we can revisit some of our points and see if they still hold true after we've consumed more Marxism.
yeah, yeah. And I was thinking to myself, like, I don't really want to do the Hobbit movies analysis because I think you'd almost just do it as a series instead of
Oh yeah,
in like
totally.
one episode. I don't think you need the three movies for that. Sorry, Peter Jackson. You that was too much. I really enjoy them, but three
Yeah, I do too. I was like, that's my favorite book out of
I
all of
know
them.
the book is so good, but the movies are just I won't say they're too long, but there's a lot. Anyway, in the future we might have there'd be more Marxist Tolkienism. Maybe that'll be a new MLT, Marxist Leninist Tolkienist, something like that.
Tanky Tolkien time.
Yeah, yeah. Tolkien would call us tankies, I think. For he might like the movies, but he wouldn't like this. He wouldn't like to be
Oh,
called a reaction.
absolutely.
Tolkien, I don't apologize. Anyway,
Oh my god.
it's hard to end the trilogy, but here we are. And Rye, thank you for for sticking with
Thanks
this
for having
episode and
me.
and the three episodes of Left of the Projector.
Anytime, friend.
I don't know why I can't keep it together. Maybe it's sad to end the end of the journey
Single tear.
into the we can go off to the undying lands, perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe well, that's too far. But anyway, thank you all to who've stuck through the trilogy of episodes, and you can like and subscribe on your podcast application of choice. And good night, or good day, or